Hello, everyone. This is ARCA 12, and today we are reacting to a versus battle that I didn't think was going to happen, but here we are. This is, they did. This is Goji Center. First of all, Goji Center did a Great White Shark versus Dunkleonis face off, and I haven't reacted to that yet. I was intending to, and then this came out, and I decided we're going to react to this first. So I'll react to the Dunkleonis one, like probably immediately after this alongside this other one here, which is the what happens if you drop a Spinosaurus into Florida. Because that one I've been sitting on for 3 weeks now, and it's time to get to it. But we are watching the Jaws versus Free Willy, Great White versus Orca face off. First of all, orcas hunt great white sharks for fun, not just because they eat their livers and leave the rest of the shark, the you know alone, basically. I was gonna say alive. They're not alive. They've got giant gaping hole and a organ missing. They're not alive. But like they hunt great white sharks in the wild for reality. But a shark as big as Jaws might actually be able to fend off a killer whale. Fun fact, if you didn't know this about Free Willy was an orca whale named Keiko that was here in the Oregon Coast Aquarium for several years before being released into a sea pen where he unfortunately never made it out to join another pod of orcas. He had heard them in the distance, but never ended up joining them and eventually ended up passing away from old age and I think stress. But he was, for 5 years, a very popular attraction here in the Oregon Coast Aquarium, and his tank was turned into a walk-through aquarium that you can now visit over in Newport, Oregon, which is a really, really fun thing. So, like, he's kind of a hometown hero. Free Willy, like the movies, the Free Willy movies kind of were like hometown hero-esque for us here in Oregon. And I'm personally kind of rooting for Free Willy for that because it would be a great way of honoring Keiko. But we'll have to see because Bruce, aka Jaws, is no slouch and is bigger than most great whites that a regular orca would target. And most of the time, orcas target them like in packs, they hunt them in packs. They don't usually hunt them one-on-one. So maybe a one-on-one fight, Free Willy versus Jaws, Free Willy versus Bruce, might be something different. Link will be in the description below if you want to watch this without my commentary, because we'll be pausing and we'll be talking about it. Well, without further ado, let's get started.
Movies. Magical projections of millions of pictures that can inspire awe or terror. And today on Goji Center, we're wrenching two of the most famous beasts of the sea right out of film to plop them in front of each other and battle for dominance of the seas. For this totally serious event, we are pitting a most wondrous whale against one of the most sinister sharks to find out whose comatose franchise is getting revived next. In today's special edition of Monster Face-Off, we present a duel of franchises. Free Willy versus Jaws.
This is clearly just for fun, but this is still going to be amazing.
No, seriously, we're totally doing this. First things first, let's set up some ground rules. If this was solely using the first outings of both franchises, this would be an absolute squash match. We're talking about an emaciated young orca held in a tiny tank versus a great white so big that Hooper mistook it for a young megalodon in the novel. For about 5 seconds before Quint basically called him an idiot. But for anybody less in the know, since these movies came out before most of you were born, there were multiple sequels to Free Willy and Jaws. 2 direct sequels, and a reboot starring the daughter of Steve Irwin. Because the first 2 sequels are involving the same whale years later, we'll be using that as well.
I honestly didn't know that they did a reboot to Free Willy using Bindi Irwin. That's kinda neat.
This is canon. The shark from Jaws, popularly called Bruce after Steven Spielberg's lawyer, seemingly died at the end of their movie when Police Chief Brody broke physics and somehow caused an air tank to explode like dynamite. But various statements about the sharks from the video game Jaws Unleashed and Jaws the game have them as either alternate versions of the same shark or just flat out the same shark. Somehow. And because all statements are totally 100% true, and we should use them even in contradiction to other evidence, this is canon.
basically, this has to have been when did this get released? It says a day ago. This must have been their version of a, um, what are the April Fool's joke, but I can't be sure because it's Friday, April 3rd right now. So, and it's not quite midnight, so it's not April 4th yet. So this was released after April Fool's Day, but this sounds like it was meant to be an April Fool's video.
And to round it out, we'll be using aspects of the sharks from the second and fourth movie. In the totally canon novelizations, yes, those are a thing, the novels for the second and fourth movie establish a clear lineage, with the second and fourth sharks being the mate and child of Bruce. This brings some interesting X factors involved, but we'll get to those later. We're not using the third movie's shark from Jaws 3D, both because that shark was absurdly huge even by Jaws movie standards, 35 plus feet versus Bruce's almost 25, and because this franchise introduced something much older than a lot of people would think, with the fourth movie completely retconning the events of Jaws 3D, meaning those hilarious 3D effects are no longer canonically trying to poke someone's eye out.
Thank God. That movie was awful.
There is more material we will be noting later, but
I mean, to be fair, I feel like all of the Jaws movies in some way, shape, or form were a little awful, but Jaws 3D was the worst, easily.
Completely retconning the events of Jaws 3D, meaning those hilarious 3D effects are no longer canonically trying to poke someone's eye out. There is more material we will be noting later, but let's get started with this completely legit face-off. Section 1, Corporal Build. Jaws, aka Bruce, and the freest of Willys are not supposedly, keyword supposedly, fantasy monsters.
Okay, first of all, that was an odd way to say Free Willy. That sounded dirty in so many different fashions, and I don't like it.
The original intent of both franchises' first outing is that both of them are two completely standard Carcharodon Carcharius and Orcinus Orca. Willy was a young orca held in abusive captive conditions, portrayed by an actual orca held in abusive captive conditions. While the other movies thankfully only needed use of an animatronic for the effects,
it should be noted that, like, when I said that Keiko was here in the Oregon Coast Aquarium, he was here to get rehabilitated so he could be released into the wild. But he was a show orca beforehand, similar to like Shamu and stuff like that. So like I don't want people to misconstrue the fact that like he was here as an attraction. But he was the ultimate goal for him to be here in Oregon was to have him released into the wild. He just needed to get his strength because when he came to Oregon, he was in bad shape. That's the reason why his fins bent, because that's a clear sign of malnourishment and abuse.
First movie did use a real whale for a lot of shots, so we can be reasonably certain Willy was roughly the same size as the orca portraying them. Named Keiko, this orca was severely malnourished and small at only about 3,000 kilograms. Thankfully, Keiko did get better accommodations and was eventually nursed back to better health, growing to about 7.3 meters long and 5,200 kilograms. And given that Willy also was living in better conditions in the wild in his later adventures, we can be reasonably certain he wound up a similar size. He certainly got a happier ending than his actor. Pro tip, kids, don't look it up unless you want a sad day. So it is likely Willy got even larger, but we'll play it safe. Jaws, meanwhile, has several sizes,
It's true, unfortunately, but you know, the long and the short of it is that we tried. We really did try to get Keiko back into the wild. Just didn't end up working out.
Depending on which source you use. But the most consistent one puts the shark in the original movie and its nearly identical offspring in the fourth movie at about 7.6 meters or 25 feet long. This is already considered bigger than the most reliably measured great whites and makes previous channel guest star Deep Blue look like small fry. Using volumetric scaling from known sharks, a great white roughly the size of Amity Island's scourge would be somewhere around 5,000 to 5,500 kg. So, we essentially have a fairly average-sized male orca against a great white the size of an orca. Whilst the female sharks of the second and third movie are larger, we're chiefly using Bruce and his progeny from the fourth outing for this comparison. This puts the physical size contest between the two at nearly dead even. This category stands at a draw. Section 2.
Interesting.
Mobility. Due to the nature of this kind of fight we're analyzing and the kinds of animals involved, we'll be combining speed and stamina together for this one. The true top speed of the two apex predators of the modern ocean is still a bit of an open question. So, the great white shark is the largest member of the mackerel shark family, scientifically called Lamnidae, which also includes speed demons like the mako shark. Unlike most other sharks, Lamnidae sharks have special blood vessels that keep their swimming muscles warm, allowing them to maintain higher body temperatures for better speed and endurance than most fish. Size-wise, though, Jaws the Elder and the Junior would be slowed down somewhat by their larger size, increasing drag and water resistance, but they still can reach respectable speeds. Willy certainly was in far better health in the later movies than in his first outing. Orca are the largest of the dolphins and are practically equally as adept at rapid movement underwater as their smaller cousins. The contest between sharks and toothed whales has been a long one, but a key reason why these mammals have managed to seriously compete with sharks, despite the predatory fish having hundreds of millions of years of a head start in the ocean, comes down to one thing: oxygen. Water obviously has oxygen in it, so does air. However, despite water being a denser material, it is harder to get as much oxygen out of it as breathing air. Most larger sharks, like great whites, employ what is called ram breathing, where the water is filtered over the gills by force due to the shark constantly swimming forward with its mouth and/or gills open. Water goes over the gills, gills get out the oxygen. This method helps constantly add oxygen in, but it does so at a trickle. That's why when some species of sharks stop moving or get toppled into an odd position long enough, they might actually suffocate. Breathing air and using mammalian lungs does mean that an orca can't constantly take on oxygen as it's swimming around, but the air tank it has is more than enough to turbocharge the body. Oxygen is a lot easier to get out of the air than it is in the water, and marine mammals like Willy have special adaptations to store even more oxygen in the bloodstream and organs long before they need to take another breath.
That definitely sounds like it's going to be a point for Willy in this case, because it would be able to theoretically, while its mobility, I feel like the mobility of a killer whale is better than that of a shark, especially that of a great white shark the size of Bruce, basically what he just said. But at the same time, I also feel like the oxygen factor is going to play a bigger role here than the mobility. Sorry, still getting over a cold. Because of the fact that you're going to need oxygen to power those muscles. You doesn't matter how mobile you are if you can't power those muscles. And if you can take in oxygen more easily through the air than the water, and you're already more flexible and more easily capable of turning, it makes sense that the orca would outmaneuver the shark.
And with a top speed comparable to a large shark, this means Willy would be capable of faster movement for longer periods of time and in quicker explosive bursts than the shark. Edge. Willy.
Okay, that's
Section 3. Armor. Orca, as the largest dolphins to ever exist, have skin similar to their smaller cousins. The outermost layer of skin, the epidermis, is reasonably strong by mammal standards, but isn't especially thick. What gives them the most protection, however, is the underlying layers, like the dermis and blubber, that act like padding on top of the muscle. These structures add a significant amount of weight to the animal and function chiefly for thermal regulation. Still, at up to 10 centimeters thick in some select regions, it does perform well at cushioning the bludgeoning impact and reducing the effect of piercing teeth to some degree. But on the other hand, shark skin virtually needs no introduction, especially after the overview of this exact same species we gave when Deep Blue found herself in the fight of her life against a time-traveling dunk in a previous face-off.
Which is what I'm going to be reacting to after this.
But to give the cliff notes, great white shark skin is covered in heavily modified teeth called dermal denticles, like with most sharks. These are chiefly for blocking parasites and making the shark more hydrodynamic in the water, but they do help add extra defense all the same. What protects a shark the most, however, is the extremely tough underlying layers of skin. Sometimes overestimated on the internet, research shows these layers tend to be around 3 centimeters thick. Since Bruce and his son are both male great whites, their skin wouldn't be as thick proportionally as a large female would be, but it still proved plenty resilient against anything but large, piercing weapons. So who wins the edge? Willy has thicker armor in several regions, but a deciding factor is how well each of their armor does against the opponent's weapons. The conical teeth of an orca are great at crushing and gripping, but some of their penetrating power will be dampened by the stiffer, scaled hide of the shark. Great whites, meanwhile, specifically evolved to hunt marine mammals and are used to sawing through blubber. Both are fully capable of hurting the other with their primary weapons, but the shark's defenses give it just a bit more extra protection when talking on a purely physical basis. Whether or not the shark's hide will be pierced by a superior weapon than just teeth remains to be seen. For now, the edge in this category goes to Jaws.
But as I've said before, orcas regularly hunt great whites to eat their livers. So this is definitely not impossible for Willy to take out Jaws.
Section 4. Bite Effectiveness. Orca and great whites do have broadly similar diets, but go about tearing up their prey very differently. What you're looking at is a tooth of an orca and a tooth of the great white shark. Orca have conical teeth that seize and crush, refusing to let go as the dolphin thrashes around. This basically weaponizes the water resistance to dismember prey. If the orca thrashes upwards, for example, when something is in its mouth, the water pressure on the rest of the target's body pushes it down. This keeps happening until eventually the flesh the dolphin is biting into gives way and is twisted out. But how much power are we talking about? The true total force of an orca's jaws is still hard to pin down, contrary to some questionable claims on the internet of it being over 60,000 newtons. Still, they have been recorded breaking thick bones on other marine mammals that would have required substantial force to crunch through. So, a chomping pressure somewhere north of 18,000 newtons is very likely. For Jaws? Despite the movie poster famously using a mako shark for the grisly grill of the antagonist of Jaws, which you can tell from looking at the long pointed teeth on the poster, the attributes of the movie sharks are fairly true to life for a great white, at least as far as a half-functioning animatronic that tried to eat George Lucas can get. Great white teeth are heavily serrated on both sides.
I forgot about that story. I forgot about the fact that Bruce almost killed George Lucas.
And largely symmetrical, unlike most other types of sharks. After being grabbed by these fangs, smaller targets might be cut in half and swallowed up. Bigger targets are usually grabbed and thrashed against, which works the serrations back and forth into the flesh like a series of saws. A shark the size of Jaws having a crunching force somewhere around 15,000 to 16,000 newtons is entirely possible. This might be somewhat less than a more mature Willy, but the differences in the teeth help make up for the gap. The whale is a crusher who uses the water around them to tear out chunks and dismember. This shark is a shredder, sawing through tissue to cause massive lacerations. Willy's bite would cause the most damage if he targeted the shark's fins or gills, whereas the shark would be able to sort through the blubber and padding all over Willy's body. And if given the opportunity to crunch long enough, this could be fatal. To be fair, both methods can be lethal, but one is more easy to inflict greater damage when tooth makes contact with the opponent. Jaws takes a decisive advantage with their bite. Section 5. X Factor. Longtime viewers of the channel might be a bit confused why this section is showing up earlier than usual, since this is usually the last category. But before we proceed with the next categories, we thought we needed to discuss X Factor first. If we are going on all of the inclusive stories of the two sagas, there is a very important difference to make between a matchup of these two awesome oceanics and their real-life counterparts.
Intelligence? Because I feel like to me, that would be the X factor is intelligence. Because I feel like Jaws is significantly more intelligent than an average great white. And orcas in general are just hyper intelligent. And I feel like Free Willy just happened to be like an exceptional example of that. So I would feel intelligence would be the X factor.
And since we're being totally legitimately serious and including the video games into this, we have the confusing quandary of the Bruce spontaneously regenerating after being blown up by Chief Brody. And we may have just found out how this is possible. So, in the novelization of the fourth movie, because yes, that is a thing, we get a hint at why these sharks seem supernatural. Why do they keep going after the Brody family? Why does each shark seem to have the same personality and drive of the other ones? How did one stalk Brody's widow across most of a continent to the Bahamas before trying to take a bite out of Alfred from Batman? How can this make any sense? Why is this a thing? If your answer was, a wizard did it, you're actually right. Voodoo, or rather Vodou in the real world, is a series of folk beliefs and religious practices. West Africa captives wrenched away from their homes under the brutal conditions in the New World, mixing native beliefs with Catholicism. In crazy Hollywood land, it basically means politically incorrect warlocks are a thing and exist in the Jaws universe. Why are these sharks so ravenous for human flesh, despite ample studies showing sharks do not become habitual man-eaters like some other predators? Magic. How is it that same shark from Jaws seems to just continuously keep reincarnating and acting the exact same way every time? Magic! How is it that when they're angry enough, despite sharks lacking any vocal structures whatsoever, they roar like Jerry the Mouse? Because a mostly off-screen wizard had some beef with the Brody family and was basically off-screen playing Jaws Unleashed this whole time, piloting the sharks. This was never confirmed to be the case in the video game, but it certainly does explain a few things. And because we're being completely serious and thorough, this is canon. It also raises serious questions as to if the sharks can ever permanently die, or will their supernatural condition just transpose itself onto another shark of the same bloodline? Or if the video games really are correct and somehow Bruce pulled himself back together after exploding. So, how is Willy supposed to stand up to the forces of such sorcery? After all, this was just a series about a boy helping his captive friend highlight the problems of ORCA in marine parks a decade before Blackfish came out.
Right.
Well,
I feel so useless.
Yep, magic. In Free Willy, the animated series set between the events of the movies.
This is something I didn't know. I had no idea there was an animated series for Free Willy. What the hell? What?
Our protagonist, Jesse, and his orca friend were gifted magical powers so they could communicate and talk to each other to learn valuable lessons about friendship. And also fight an evil cyborg going around the world causing problems in his sci-fi submarine. Along the way, they had such adventures as confronting pollution monsters and fighting a very biologically implausible hybrid giant squid that seems like it should have come out of the Hall of Shame. Yeah, when you heard about this series being the magic of the 90s, you didn't think it was being literal, did you?
No,
Neither did we. So now that we established that there are some supernatural phenomena and wizardry at play, let's proceed with the remaining typical and atypical category.
You've got to be kidding me. Like, I would have easily just called it good at freaking like intelligence factor, but no, we're throwing magic in there. What the hell?
Section 6, Intelligence.
Okay, there's the intelligence. Got it. Okay.
Normal great white sharks are capable of recognizing potential prey and threats from experience, possibly even hunting in groups to a limited capacity and showing much more advanced cognition than most fish. In Crazy Country, meanwhile, these magical sharks are capable of holding grudges, identifying specific targets based on their family lineage, tracking people over hundreds of kilometers even when they're in a plane somehow, and figuring out how to escape traps and hazards like confinement in a marine park when someone playing a PlayStation game is controlling them. Orca are famously some of the most intelligent predators on the planet, with individual pods led by a matriarch with decades of experience and insight. Individual orca pods are capable of specific hunting techniques, depending on what prey is most available to them in their region, such as learning to flip over sharks to induce immobility and make them easier to kill. Willy has also shown complex memory and intelligence, like figuring out how to get around hazards to inspire the poster of the first movie, disabling whaling ships without causing serious harm to himself, and choosing to spare a whaler at the behest of his human friend, who also probably was trying to make sure the third movie didn't shoot up in rating. In the animated series, he uses tools and combative strategy, and he talks, and sounds like a nasally version of Leon from Resident Evil 2. Unless Jaws somehow ends up with a musical at one point, with the shark getting a solo singing number to go with the roaring, the whale takes this one. Section 7, Physicality. Both combatants have survived attacks from substantially larger opponents, crashing through stone formations, shattering reinforced glass, bites from other marine predators, and underwater explosions going off next to them. And considering that the shockwaves of explosions are much more powerful underwater than in the air, this is especially noteworthy. So in terms of general resistance to blunt impacts, the two are comparable. But what about what they can take in addition to what they can dish out? Willy, reboots aside, is still just one orca and has been threatened with being taken out of the picture by sufficient force before. Jaws, as a collective, meanwhile, is functionally immortal. If one shark dies, it seems that the dark magic driving them just manifests in another shark, potentially of the same bloodline. That, or if we take the games completely seriously, apparently they can pull themselves back together after exploding. Maybe if we really are mixing voodoo and video games together, extra lives are just a thing that exists. Useful, considering the Jaws sharks seem to have an odd tendency to explode even when they really shouldn't. Bruce the Elder detonated from an air tank getting punctured in his mouth, which several tests, including one done by the Mythbusters, showed an air tank getting punctured would turn into a projectile instead of exploding. His son in the fourth movie, meanwhile, exploded upon being impaled on the bow of a ship for seemingly no reason. Well, got a terrible case of the explosions, though.
That's okay. Admittedly, I haven't seen the fourth movie, but like, you have to have consistency, right? You have to be able to look at something and be like, okay, there has to be a logical reason for this. But then again, as I'm saying that, I remember Sharknado exists, so I guess not.
Those extra lives might come in handy. Remember, all of this is canon. The shark gets the uncanny edge here. We are now ready to reveal which of these two will swim out of this situation alive and well.
Because of this, I'm predicting it's probably going to be Jaws.
The shark has an edge in overall bite effectiveness and physicality, given they seemingly can respawn. Willy, meanwhile, takes a very important edge in underwater mobility and intelligence.
But then again, the intelligence, I feel like, is the overall X factor to me. I'm removing magic from the picture. The fact that Willy is as intelligent as he is, I feel like that's going to be the key to victory. Because it doesn't matter how good you are with your weapon. It doesn't matter how powerful you are, or how good your weapons are, or how good your armor is. If your opponent's capable of outthinking all of those things and able to outmaneuver you, there's a very solid chance you're not going to walk away from this. So I feel like Willy's mobility and intelligence might actually be the factor that kills Bruce.
These two are dead even in strength and nonsensical X factors. Coming up, Jaws versus Willy. Time to see which franchise is being put underwater next.
Combat between both animals may involve variables not present in the real world. Fair enough. Whoever animated this is having too much fun already. No.
Dude, anyways, like...
No. Just no.
I don't know, I love that movie. Oh my god, is that a shark? Oh my god!
tail smack is a totally legit move that orcas will use to stun their opponents. So that tracks. Well, okay, this reminds me of the Indom 2.0 video where like the intelligence of the creature is going to allow them to use tools. So he's just gonna become a narwhal. He's gonna become a narwhal.
Free Willy swims free once more, and apparently
I knew it. I knew it. I called it. I called it. You can't keep a good whale down, even though it's technically a dolphin. But whatever. Can't keep a good porpoise down.
saved a surviving Riot clone who escaped GOJI HQ, but those two struggle may not be over yet. Physicality-wise, Willy and Jaws were very comparable, if we're going into complete Looney Land and compositing both of them. Both of them have done things no shark or orca has any business doing when the supernatural is totally seriously factored. Both of them have been hurt by damage the other could have inflicted, so the deciding factor was mind versus muscle. The whale was smart enough to try and use different tactics to his advantage, and with the shark having an odd tendency to explode, it's quite possible Willy would have unwittingly caused such an event. But you know that thing they say about cash cow franchises. They never stay dead forever.
Right.
Willy might have been capable of leveraging his intelligence to defeat Jaws, but unless the whale can counter the inexplicable magic curse, the shark might wind up pulling itself back together time and time again. Just like its franchise inevitably will when Universal eventually reboots it.
I liked it. I like that. That was a decent overall like franchise analysis. It was a lot of fun, very chaotic, completely nonsensical, but a lot of fun. And as a fan of the first couple of movies of both of those franchises, yeah, no, it didn't need to be serious. It just needed to be entertaining, and that's exactly what it was. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. Thank you for joining me. I am ARCAPA12, and I will see you in the next video.